The senses matter for understanding the city because they're probably the most direct way that we understand the city. That's our first encounter with it. It's a way to encounter the city simultaneously, and it's at the same time where we start to filter things out, right? So that process translates immediately into the city's built environment and immediately into the social environment as well. What we choose to focus on, what we choose to let in, what we choose to exclude is the basic and kind of fundamental question of the city, of what is the city. So the senses are, again, they're a very, very direct way to understand how this happens. And I think it's also important because we don't understand them very well. I think the senses are such a subjective field that are so there's so much left to map out about them that it's a really, really wide field of study right now that will probably provide a lot of insight into why our cities are the way they are. The most surprising thing about the research that we did in the framework of this project, I would have to say everything, because we had never really taken a sensory approach to the city, not consciously or not specifically in focusing on these elements. So we were surprised on the one hand by how much of our understanding of the city, even when it's expressed in very abstract terms, how much that can rely on or privilege one sense at the expense of the others. So for instance, when we want our public spaces to be, nice places, productive places, or places of rest, and places where society happens, or places where society is reproduced or maintained, our normative evaluations of that, or our value judgments of these aspects, they seem to us just kind of natural, but they're actually, a lot of it has to do with, how clean it looks to us, whether or not it's actually hygienic, which hygienic is actually, something that's a multisensorial phenomenon in and of itself, right? So all of these things end up having to do with value judgments that we make based on different perceptions that we're not always aware of the robustness of the information that we're using to arrive at those value judgments, and the senses give us kind of a metric through which to understand that robustness. So I think that's one thing that surprised me was precisely how the senses can help us map out what we think we know, but what we don't know. And my work for the CCCB is not as a curator, although curation is a major part of the CCCB's work. I coordinate projects and these, and I come at kind of our debates and all of this from my sociological background. And I think this project, what it helped inform was, on the one hand, it makes you think about a lot of the experience that we take for granted, because at the CCCB, for instance, we have programs that are designed specifically for people that are, for instance, impaired in some of their senses, for the blind, for people who have who are deaf, for instance, people with Alzheimer's, whose perceptions are different than others. And so thinking through these programs, for instance, the senses obviously is central. On the other hand, adopting a sensory approach to some of the questions that we have traditionally used about the city, I think it broadens the field of topics that we can address, and I think it allows us to deal with that broader frame of set of questions in a lot more profundity, in a lot more depth.